Welcome to Nightmare Claire, where we delve into the darkest corners of the human experience. Whether you're a fan of horror, the paranormal, or just love a good scare, join me as I narrate spine-chilling stories that will keep you up at night. Hit subscribe, turn off the lights, and let the nightmares begin. It was supposed to be a romantic weekend getaway for me and Jalen. We were taking a leisurely road trip up the coast with no real destination in mind, just us, the open road, and ocean views. After driving a few hours, Jalen reached over to turn up the radio. "Can you believe we took the whole weekend off? This was such a good idea," he said with a content sigh, tapping his fingers along to the beat. "I know, right? It's perfect. We both needed a break from the city." I gazed out at the fields rushing by, feeling relaxed. The sun was getting low when Jalen pointed out a hitchhiker on the side of the road. A woman in her 20s, it looked like, alone, tattered backpack next to her feet. I saw the look on Jalen's face as we approached. "Babe, don't tell me. We can't pick her up," I protested. "She's all by herself out here. No other cars around. We should at least see if she needs help." "I have a bad feeling about this. There's probably a reason she's alone." But Jalen was already slowing the car. I reluctantly agreed to pull over. The woman hurried over, a big relieved smile on her face. "Oh my gosh, thank you so much. You guys are lifesavers," she gushed, peeking into the back seat. "Just a lift to the next town would be amazing." Something was off, but I couldn't quite put my finger on it. Jalen leaned over to push open the passenger door. "Sure, hop in, no problem." The young woman settled in, clutching her backpack in her lap. "I'm Sarah, by the way." "Jalen and Emily," my boyfriend replied, making the introductions. "So Sarah, what's your story? Are you out here alone?" She launched into some vague rambling about traveling around, getting inspired, blah, blah. I kept quiet, studying her in the mirror. After a few miles, Sarah leaned forward intently. "Actually, I wasn't completely honest with you. The thing is, I'm being followed by this guy. Well, he's an ex. He's been stalking me." Jalen and I exchanged a worried look. "Did you call the police?" I asked carefully. She shook her head rapidly. No, they won't help. He's got connections, powerful friends. That's why I'm trying to get away. I messed up. I trusted the wrong person." Her voice broke like she might cry. Jalen reached over awkwardly to pat her knee. "Hey, we can stop at the next gas station and call someone for you." "A gas station?" She suddenly looked terrified. "No, please, he knows to look for me at gas stations. Just keep driving. Don't stop anywhere. Just get me as far away as you can." This was spiraling out of control. I made eye contact with Jalen. He had that stubborn, headstrong look on his face that told me he was going to white knight it. Sure enough, he continued driving while Sarah calmed down in the back seat, dabbing her eyes. I had a sick feeling this was going to end badly. My phone had no signal, so I couldn't even text anyone in case things went south. After about 15 minutes of tense silence, Sarah sat up straight, peering out the windows. I think he found me. Somehow he's tracking my phone's GPS." Jalen and I both instinctively looked around. There were no other cars visible. "Are you sure?" I started to say. "Yes. Oh God, he's coming. He's got a gun. You have to help me." Sarah suddenly exploded into hysterics, fumbling in her backpack. Before I could react, Jalen had swerved the car onto the shoulder and slammed on the brakes. Everything happened so fast. Sarah bolted out the door while two masked men materialized from the bushes on the side of the road. One thug dragged Jalen from the driver's seat while the other shoved a gun in my face. I screamed, terror paralyzing me as Jalen was pistol whipped, collapsing to the ground. "Don't make a sound if you want to live," the masked man growled. I could only whimper and nod. Sarah tossed some zip ties to her accomplices. In a flash, Jalen and I were bound and dragged into the bushes, discarded like garbage. The men frisked us for valuables, snatching my engagement ring, wallet, and phone. I watched in horror as they climbed into our car and peeled away, leaving us abandoned on the side of the road. I don't know how long we lie there, my body racked with sobs. Finally, I was able to maneuver over and try to untie Jalen. He came to gradually, wincing in pain, but alive, thank God. We were finally able to flag down a passing vehicle and use their cell to contact the authorities. While the criminals were never caught, the psychological wound they inflicted never healed. Trust destroyed. My own sensibilities shattered by a shockingly premeditated betrayal. It took Jalen weeks to recover physically. As for the emotional trauma, we both struggled to get back to normal. I wrestled with guilt, feeling I should have trusted my instincts. Every loud noise made me jump, and we could never find that perfect sense of relaxation while driving after that pivotal violation. Sarah's smiling face as she climbed into our car still haunts me. The fear seeps back in sometimes, gnawing at the edges of reality. An unexpected ring of a doorbell becomes sinister. Every stranger a possible threat. Treacherous intentions could be lurking under any calm exterior. I try not to let the poison of that experience permanently darken my worldview, but it's a constant battle. So keep your doors locked. Do not pick up hitchhikers no matter how harmless they seem. And most importantly, learn to trust your gut. I'll always regret ignoring that ominous prickle of unease. Hey, it's Nightmare Claire. How'd you enjoy that first video? Crazy, right? Well, if you enjoyed it, I'm here to ask you to subscribe. I'd love for you to be a part of this nightmarish community. I don't want to take up too much of your time, so let's get into the next story. It's a wild one. One thing I hate about being questioned by the police is how they ask you the same questions over and over. They make you repeat the same traumatic story again and again. Believe me, I wish we never went. I wish I could take it all back. I wish we had never been so stupid. The detective is staring at me now, waiting for me to tell him what happened. So here I go. I hope this is the last time. We were 3 lifelong friends, treating ourselves to a weekend at a luxury, all-inclusive resort in Cabo San Lucas. Liz and Katie surprised me by booking the trip after I had been going through a rough breakup. This is exactly what I needed, I sighed happily, sinking into the plush poolside chair while taking a sip of my margarita. After that breakup and the stress at work, getting away for a girls' trip was the best idea. Seriously, Mexico is so beautiful. The resort is incredible, Liz agreed. She stretched out on her lounge chair, admiring the sparkling infinity pool. After a perfect day of suntanning, guacamole, and laughter over old inside jokes, we headed back to our suite to get ready for a night out. Mexico had a thriving nightlife, and we wanted to be a part of that. Cheers! Katie toasted, clinking our glasses together. As Katie tipped back her tequila shot, she flashed me an exhilarated smile. I have a feeling things are about to get wild tonight. We pre-gamed with shots of local tequila, the fiery liquid hitting our empty stomachs. Soon, we were feeling giggly and brave enough to leave the resort's safety behind. Looking back on that situation, leaving the safety of the resort was the first of many mistakes on that trip. Following the directions from the hotel concierge, we hopped in a cab and ventured off the property towards a lively club district about 15 minutes away. Paying the driver in pesos, we stepped out onto the bustling street packed with music, vendors, and young people looking for a good time. Whoa, this is not like the crowd at the resort, Liz commented, looking around at all the energetic people. Most appeared to be locals or daring travelers eager for authentic nightlife, rather than the resort bar scene. We huddled together self-consciously, but pushed on towards a rhythmic thumping bass line spilling out of an open club entrance. The inside of the club was dim and crowded, day glow paint glowing under black lights. Everyone danced shoulder to shoulder without a care in the world. Katie grabbed our hands, pulling us into the pulsating throng. We're in Mexico. Let's live it up and meet some cute Mexican boys. A few songs and another round of drinks later, that's exactly what happened. We caught the attention of a group of good-looking young locals who elbowed over flirtatiously. But something seemed immediately off about them. Up close, they looked hardened, is the word that came to mind. Potential gang members, maybe? I wasn't sure about the tattoos, barely hidden switchblades, and persistently aggressive body language. But Katie and Liz were already transfixed. I tried to relax and go with the flow as I danced between the two men craving my attention. After a while, the energy shifted. Our new friends migrated towards the exit, gesturing for us to follow. Liz and Katie were enthralled, but I felt that prickle of fear grow more intense. Hey, maybe we should just stay here and dance? I suggested hesitantly. Katie batted my hand in annoyance. Don't be paranoid, babe. They want to show us an after party or something. Live a little. I could tell she had way too many drinks. So, against my better judgment, I followed them as the men led us outside into a dark alley between buildings. My heart thudded louder with each step across the cracked pavement, away from any witnesses. Trash and broken glass crunched under our heels. All of a sudden, the tallest and toughest looking one spun around and whipped a pistol out from his waistband. All right, empty your pockets. Phones, cash, valuables, now, he barked in gritty Spanish. I froze, stomach sinking. Shit. The men surrounded us menacingly as Liz and Katie shrieked, hands flying up in surrender. They stripped off their jewelry with shaking fingers and handed over purses and cell phones. But as if by cruel impulse, the gunman locked eyes with Katie. An unsettling smile formed on his lips. You, come with us. Katie cowered backwards, shaking her head in mute terror. Liz and I clutched each other. This couldn't be happening. No, please don't hurt her, I begged, my voice breaking. Katie was like a sister to me. Before I knew it, the man had slammed his fist into my face. I collapsed on the ground, blood gushing from my nose, head spinning. With the pistol still pointed steady, the man reached out and tangled his fist in Katie's hair, wrenching her head back. If you know what's good for you, you'll obey. Outnumbered and under threat of deadly violence, we had no choice as Katie was dragged away through the shadowy alley, kicking and screaming. The last glimpse I had was my friend's wide-eyed, tear-streaked face looking back in horror. We tried running for help. Before the thieves slipped into the night, they threatened to hunt down our families if the police were involved. But we tried running for help anyway. Covered in blood and filth, Liz and I eventually staggered back to the resort to raise the alarm of the hotel's security. But while the concierge said they contacted the authorities, it was difficult navigating the language barrier amidst our semi-hysterical state. Nobody seemed particularly alarmed or inclined to seriously assist. Katie was likely already being trafficked before local enforcement did anything. We refused to leave Mexico without her, bargaining for extra days at the resort, plastering her photo everywhere we could, and calling missing persons hotlines, but Katie remained vanished without a trace. Weeks crawled by heartbreakingly without Katie. As our trip neared its end, Liz and I dreaded returning home without our best friend. The drive to the Arizona border was filled with mournful silence. Endless queues of cars waited in line for inspection. Border Patrol officers meticulously examined documents and vehicle contents before allowing passage into the U.S. I drove, while Liz stared numbly out the window. Suddenly, she gasped and bolted upright. "Jess, look! It's Katie!" Sure enough, there sat Katie in the back seat of an aged SUV a few cars ahead. Two men occupied the front seats, but I barely noticed them. All I could focus on was Katie's vacant expression, gazing straight ahead as if in a trance. Was she so traumatized that she couldn't even attempt to escape? This fleeting glimpse was our only chance to save her. Liz and I leapt from our idling car and flagged down a nearby officer. We urgently explained that our kidnapped friend was in that SUV. Officers surrounded the vehicle, yelling for the occupants to exit. The men reluctantly emerged, but Katie remained sitting motionless in the back. My heart clenched at the sight. I couldn't even begin to imagine what she's been through. The next moments seemed to unfold in slow motion. As an officer wrenched open Katie's door, her limp body tipped sideways and the zip-up sweatshirt she was wearing unzipped, revealing a large gash starting from her throat all the way down to her pelvis. They had used her body as a vessel to transport illegal items into the U.S. I doubled over, vomiting, as Liz released a ragged primal scream. The officers swarmed in shock around Katie's butchered remains. Our once vibrant friend had been slaughtered only days before, likely after outliving her usefulness to the traffickers. The gruesome discovery would torment Liz and I forever.
I have one that's much worse for you. I grew up in Southern California next to the border, and this is a crazy story that happened to someone that I know. Picture this, you're a guy, you finally found a girl that you want to settle down with and be with forever. You're extremely happy with her. You go on a trip with her and some of your friends to Mexico, okay? You're at a bar, things are going great, tequila's flowing, mariachi music's playing, you're having tacos or whatever, and everything's great, okay? You're busy talking to your friends, and her friends are busy or whatever, so she goes to the bathroom. You don't really hear from her for a few minutes, so you go look, and she's not there, and you can't find her. You spend the next couple days searching because you can't find her anywhere in Mexico, and you're panicking, you're freaking out, but your trip's over. You have to come back. You've alerted authorities. There's nothing that anyone can do at the moment. She's gone. The girl that you thought didn't exist, who's so perfect for you, is gone. So you're in line at the border trying to get back into the United States, and there's traffic, and you look over at a car, at an SUV, and you see her like sitting in the back seat, and you're like, is that guys, is that her? Your friends look at her and look at you and like, oh my God, that is her. So you're waving at her, rolling down your window, trying to get her attention. And you're in the border patrol line, so you're trying not to like get out or make a big scene, but you're still trying to get their attention. Your girlfriend is not being responsive at all. She's just sitting there, kind of sitting down, sitting face forward, not moving. And so you notice something's off, like something's definitely wrong. You haven't heard from her. What is happening? You can't do anything to get her attention, so you finally alert the border patrol guards and you say, hey, that truck has my girlfriend in there. You know, she went missing a few days ago. You know, you got to go check it out. So they do. They go over, they check out the car, and they pull her out of the car, and they bring everyone else out of the car too. When they pull her out of the car, they realize she's dead and her entire body is filled with drugs. She's been killed, and everything in her has been removed, and they've just filled her with drugs to get her across the border.
It was just another quiet night during my shift at St. Agnes Hospital. For reference, I'm a 27-year-old female security guard who has been working the graveyard shift here for nearly 5 years. The pay isn't great, but I actually enjoy the peacefulness of the hospital at night. The fluorescent lights hum softly overhead as I make my usual rounds, my footsteps echoing lightly in the empty halls. As I pass the nurse's station on the 3rd floor, I see a fresh pot of coffee and help myself to a cup. Brenda, the night nurse, smiles at me from behind a towering stack of patient files. We make some small talk about the unseasonably cold weather outside before I continue my patrol. My beat is predictable, starting on the top floor and working my way down. On each floor, I peek into the patient rooms just to ensure no one has fallen out of bed or needs assistance. Everyone seems to be sleeping soundly tonight. Before heading downstairs, I take a final sip of coffee and toss the empty styrofoam cup into a nearby bin. I've just reached the 2nd floor when I hear a loud crash from down the hall, followed by a scream. I halt abruptly, adrenaline flooding my senses as I try to peer through the dim lighting. It sounded like shattered glass, and it was coming from one of the patient rooms on my right, room 217 to be exact. I reach for the 2-way on my belt with a slightly trembling hand. Brenda, are you there? I heard commotion in 217 on the 2nd floor. I'm going to investigate. Brenda's staticky voice echoes back almost immediately. Copy that, Michelle. Backup is on the way. My heart is thumping loudly in my ears as I creep slowly towards room 217. The door is closed, and the corridor is still seemingly empty. Carefully, I test the door handle and find it unlocked. Swallowing hard, I nudge it open with the rubber toe of my shoe. It's pitch black inside. I fumble along the wall searching for a light switch. My fingers finally find it and flick it upwards, flooding the room in harsh fluorescent lighting. What I see makes my stomach drop. Jagged shards of glass litter the linoleum floor beneath the broken window. The wind gusts through violently, fluttering the privacy curtains. Besides the shattered glass, there is no one. Is anyone here? I call out, scanning the corners wearily. Silence answers. I glance around confused. Where did that scream come from? My eyes land on the adjoining bathroom door. It was closed, but I could see the flickering movement underneath, followed by what sounds like labored breathing. Carefully, avoiding the glass shards, I cross the room and lean my ear against the bathroom door. The sounds grow louder and more frantic, a scrambling movement combined with short, painful gasps. Hello? My own voice comes out strained and shaky now, more scuffling but no response. I try the handle, and of course, it's locked. Dread creeps down my spine, but I know I need to check inside. I take a small step back and forcefully kick by the door handle. Wood splinters as it swings violently open, slamming against the bathroom wall. The fluorescent light flickers on automatically, illuminating a small, fragile-looking woman with tangled gray hair crouched behind the toilet. Her eyes are wild and dart back and forth, but seem to look right through me. They finally settle on something to my right and widen in absolute terror. She lets out an ear-piercing shriek and attempts to push herself further into the corner, muttering incoherently under her ragged breath. I glanced behind me, confused and admittedly terrified. But there is nothing, just an empty hospital room with blowing curtains and glinting shards of glass. "Ma'am, you're safe now," I say gently, taking a cautious step towards her. She is bleeding. A small gush on her forearm drips tiny crimson spots onto the white linoleum. Her hospital gown is damp with sweat, and her frail body trembles violently. "They're coming for me. I have to hide," she hissed desperately. Her eyes remain fixed on the empty space beside me, filled with complete and utter dread. At that moment, 2 nurses rush in behind me. I let out an involuntary sigh of relief. With their calming assistance, we were able to get the frantic woman into a wheelchair. They applied pressure to her wound and speak soothing words until her panicked muttering subsides to a whisper. As they wheel her past me towards the ER, I notice the name typed neatly on her bracelet: Margaret Hansen, 72, dementia patient. The realization dawns. She must have accidentally shattered the window in complete bewilderment before hiding from imaginary demons in the bathroom. A wave of sympathy washes over me as I watch them take her away. Her haunted face is etched into my mind, and I know I won't be sleeping soundly tonight. Just another quiet night at St. Agnes Hospital, I guess. But for some, the ghosts are very real. My buddy Vince had this great idea to go camping for a bro weekend getaway. Just me, him, beer, fishing rods, and hopefully no reminders from the wife asking when I'll be home. Don't get me wrong, I love Stacy, but sometimes a guy needs his space. We loaded up Vincent's ancient Jeep Cherokee, which has more duct tape than paint at this point, but hey, it runs. Barely. I made sure to pack the essentials: beef jerky, Oreos, hot dogs, and enough 6-packs to get us through 2 days, because God knows we'd need it out there in the wilderness. After stopping at the gas station for one last pit stop, we headed to Vince's uncle's cabin, which apparently hasn't been used since the 90s, but Vince assured me it still had running water. I hoped he was right, considering the alternative was using the woods as a bathroom. "So, Becca's not thrilled about me disappearing for 2 days," Vince said, turning down the country rock radio station. "Let me guess, she gave you a whole list of honey-dos to get done as soon as you're back," I chuckled. "Worse, she signed me up to chaperone a field trip for our daughter's 3rd grade class. Something about needing more dads." Ouch, I clapped Vincent on the back. "Well, buddy, you're about to unplug completely. No cell service, no distractions, just guys being guys." "Hell yeah." Vince fist bumped me. I could already see the spark coming back into his eyes now that Becca's requests would soon be out of earshot. The trip was so gorgeous, I gotta admit. We wound through hills dotted with fiery fall trees. Crisp air flowed in through Vince's broken windows. He kept insisting he'd fix them one day. The paved road turned to gravel, which soon crumbled into nearly non-existent dirt trails. We pulled up to the saddest-looking cabin ever built. Half the roof was caved in, and the front door swung crookedly by one hinge. "Are you sure your uncle hasn't been here since the Civil War?" I cracked. Vince rubbed his unshaven face sheepishly. "It may not be the Ritz, but I've got the keys. Let's check inside." Miraculously, there was no rot or critter infestation. Vince got a small fire going in the crumbling fireplace while I unloaded supplies. By early evening, we were kicking back in deteriorating lawn chairs, beers in hand, watching the orange sun sink behind the pines. "To the free life," I said, holding up my can. "No honeydews, no nagging, no—" Vince's enthusiasm was cut short by a blood-curdling scream ripping through the woods. We froze, beers hovering mid-toast. "What the hell was that?" I whispered. It sounded again, this time louder and more panicked. Vince and I locked eyes, then scrambled from our seats. There was definitely a woman out there shrieking for help somewhere behind the cabin. We stumbled recklessly through the wooded darkness towards the cries, leaves crunching underfoot. My heart thudded against my ribs. This was supposed to be an isolated area. Who else would be out here? Bursting into a small clearing, we skidded to a halt at the sight in front of us. A young girl, no older than college age, swayed next to a collapsed tent, clutching her throat, black streaks lining her face. Our arrival startled her, and she stumbled towards us before collapsing on her knees. "Oh my God," I gasped, rushing over. Are you okay?" Dumb question given the circumstances. The girl clawed at her neck again, eyes bulging, unable to speak. She gestured frantically to her makeshift campsite. "I think she needs her meds or something," Vince said. We scrambled around the area searching for supplies. A first aid kit, anything to help this poor girl. But other than the small pop-up tent she had collapsed next to, there was nothing else indicating she had any belongings. My hand shook as I tried offering her my canteen of water. She was deteriorating by the minute, wheezing these awful, choking sounds. I had no idea what to do. Where the hell was the girl's friends or family? Why was she alone out here, clearly needing medical attention? Finally, Vince unearthed an empty pill bottle with a worn, faded label. "Is this what you need?" The girl snatched the container desperately, but only sobbed harder when finding it empty. With a nauseating guttural noise, her eyes rolled back and she hit the ground unconscious. In a panic, I yelled for Vince to grab her legs while I hooked my arms under hers. We half carried, half dragged her limp body through the dark forest, stumbling over roots and scraggly bushes in our haste to get back to the Jeep. With considerable effort, we managed to load her into the back seat, then roared off down the dirt road away from the godforsaken cabin. "How far away is the hospital?" I panted, peeking back at the girl who hadn't moved. Vince's knuckles whitened on the cracked steering wheel. 30, maybe 40 minutes? Just hang on, lady." Flooring the gas, we fishtailed around the treacherous, unpaved hairpin curves. The Jeep's bald tires spun uneasily in the gravel, jolting us forward by inches. Finally, the trees parted onto a wider main road that had actual painted lines. We tore up asphalt, the jostling making my teeth clamp together. Still no movement from the girl in the back. I could have cried when the blessed lights of County General Hospital appeared. Vince screeched into the parking lot, and I scrambled to get the girl inside where doctors immediately swarmed with a gurney. Several confusing, dizzy hours passed of answering questions and calling the sheriff. Eventually, after the chaos subsided, I found myself slumped in a hard waiting room chair next to an equally stunned-looking Vince, both of our faces still smeared with dirt. Well, I can honestly say this was not how I envisioned the weekend going, Vince muttered, rubbing his eyes exhaustedly. A throat cleared behind us. We both whipped around to see a police officer reviewing his notepad. His name tag read, Sheriff Wagner. Sorry to interrupt you fellas, but I got a few more questions. According to her ID, the girl you brought in is Megan O'Leary, 22 years old. Ring any bells? Never seen her before tonight, Sheriff, I sighed, my nerves still jangling like a wind chime in a hurricane. He made a few more notes. Chances are she was looking for some trouble out there. We get it more often than you'd think in these parts. Kids hearing about that old Blackwater mine disaster back in the 70s and wanting to explore where it happened. People think that place is haunted. Blackwater mine? I repeated. Sorry, man, I'm not following. We were just trying to have a quiet vacation. Exasperation seeped into my voice. The sheriff eyed me evenly. Son, the abandoned copper mine where that girl was found exploded and killed 6 men almost 50 years ago. It's on the hill directly behind your uncle's property, Mr. Bell. Vince paled as we shared a look of dawning horror. Now it was all starting to sickeningly make sense. Megan had black streaks running down her face from wandering down those dangerous shafts. Her medical emergency from probably disturbing clouds of toxic copper metals. We were lucky she hadn't completely suffocated. A few more minutes and... I shook myself, not wanting to finish that thought. The sheriff tucked his notes in his pocket with an understanding nod. Anyway, I appreciate y'all getting her help as quickly as you did. She's gonna recover just fine, thanks to that fast thinking. Try to take it easy now. He touched the brim of his hat and headed off down the hall. Suddenly feeling infinitely older than when we arrived, Vince and I dragged ourselves out into the crisp night air towards his battered Jeep. Maybe I'd suggest a nice, relaxing weekend of putting around Home Depot for our next bro getaway instead. When Mark proposed on that perfect spring day in Central Park, I was over the moon. I pictured our storybook wedding, saying our vows under a floral arch as our closest friends and family looked on with joyful tears in their eyes. But finding a wedding planner nearly shattered those picturesque dreams. We interviewed what felt like hundreds of potential planners. Too stuffy, too bubbly, too expensive. Just not right. Until we met Jenna. From the moment we stepped into her chic downtown office, I knew she was the one. She had this calm confidence as she flipped through her leather-bound portfolio of past celebrity clients, casually name-dropping A-listers left and right. She just got us, you know? Saw the vision. The first few weeks under Jenna's masterful orchestration were pure magic. She swooped in and took control. Venue, catering, lighting. She had an almost spooky sixth sense for what we wanted. As we crossed item after item off our checklist, I kept thinking, why does anyone complain about wedding planning? This is easy. That was until the day I stepped out of a final dress fitting to find several missed calls from the florist. I dialed back, heart thudding. Had there been some disaster with the custom heirloom roses we'd specially ordered? But no problem with the roses. The florist simply hadn't heard a peep from me or Jenna in weeks. In fact, none of the vendors had. What was going on here? I didn't reach out because Jenna told me not to. She said it would cause confusion if both of us were in communication with the vendors. She promised me she had everything under control. My heart dropped when the caterer canceled for non-payment. The perfect venue we'd fought so hard for suddenly had no openings, booked up for the rest of the year. I couldn't believe this was happening. This was every bride's worst nightmare. Mark and I set up a meeting with Jenna so that we could get to the bottom of this. Mark and I sat across from Jenna in her meticulously decorated office, the air thick with tension. The once reassuring atmosphere now felt stifling as we confronted the unraveling threads of our dream wedding. Jenna, we've been getting calls from our vendors, the florist, the caterer, even the venue. They haven't heard from you or us in weeks, I said, my voice shaking with a mix of frustration and anxiety. Jenna leaned back in her chair, a calm smile playing on her lips. Oh, sweethearts, I assure you everything is perfectly fine. I've been managing everything diligently. I exchanged a glance with Mark, sensing his growing skepticism. But Jenna, the caterer canceled on us due to non-payment. The venue is booked solid for a year, and the florist was worried about the lack of communication. We trusted you, and now it feels like everything is falling apart. Jenna's smile did not waver, and she smoothly pulled out a folder from her drawer, filled with what appeared to be receipts and invoices. You see, there must be some misunderstanding. I have proof of every transaction, every payment. I've been handling it all. Sometimes vendors get a bit anxious. It's normal. But trust me, I've taken care of everything. I couldn't shake the sinking feeling in my stomach. The evidence she presented seemed convincing, but my instincts told me something was off. Mark, ever the pragmatic one, spoke up. Jenna, we need to understand what's going wrong here. This is our wedding. We can't afford any more surprises. Jenna's eyes narrowed for a moment, and then she sighed as if relenting. All right, maybe I haven't been as communicative as I should have been, but rest assured I have a plan to fix everything. I'll personally handle the caterer situation, and I'll find a solution for the venue. You both just need to trust me. 3 days later. The sun was setting, filling the living room with a nice glow, as Mark and I relaxed together after a long day. Wedding planning had been exhausting, but we were almost at the finish line, or so we thought. I was sitting at the kitchen island talking to Mark while he washed the dishes, when the doorbell suddenly rang, interrupting our peaceful evening at home. We looked at each other, wondering who could be stopping by unannounced. I got up from my bar stool to answer the door, expecting to see a delivery person or solicitor. Instead, it was Jenna, standing there with an apologetic smile. Hey, sorry to drop by unannounced. I just wanted to discuss a few last-minute details. Mind if I come in? I exchanged a worried glance with Mark, but nodded, gesturing for her to enter. Jenna stepped inside, a subtle fragrance trailing her. The air seemed to thicken as she made herself comfortable on the armchair across from the couch. So, about the floral arrangements, Jenna began, steering the conversation towards the wedding. I was thinking we could add a touch of elegance with some rare orchids. What do you think? As the conversation veered toward wedding details, Jenna deftly brought up personal topics. You know, she said, leaning forward with feigned concern. Wedding planning can be really stressful. You two have been handling it remarkably well. but sometimes it's good to take a step back and focus on your relationship. I exchanged glances with Mark, unsure where Jenna was heading with her words. I've seen couples crumble under the pressure. It's crucial to maintain that strong connection, she continued, her eyes locking onto Mark's. Mark shifted uncomfortably, sensing the subtle shift in atmosphere. Well, we're doing our best, he replied, a hint of skepticism in his voice. Jenna leaned back, her gaze never leaving Mark. Of course you are, but sometimes it's helpful to have a third perspective, someone who can see things from a different angle. The unease in the room grew tangible as Jenna's words hung in the air. She reached into her bag, producing a small gift box. I saw this and thought of you, Mark. It's a little token of appreciation for all the hard work you've put into the wedding. Mark accepted the box cautiously, opening it to reveal a watch. Jenna, this is too much. We can't accept this. Jenna waved off his protests with a smile. Consider it a symbol of the time and effort you've invested in this relationship. Sometimes all it takes is a small gesture to show someone how much they mean to you. Everything clicked into place as I watched Jenna try to cozy up to Mark on our couch. The missing vendor payments, the lack of communication, the generous personal gifts. It was all part of her ploy to undermine our relationship and sink her claws into my fiancé. I felt the bile rise in my throat as she cautiously placed her hand on Mark's knee while pretending to ask his opinion on the bouquet ribbons. Mark shifted awkwardly at her touch. How long had she been working her manipulation on him without me realizing it? I'd had enough. I think you should leave now, Jenna, I said sharply, standing up from my seat. Jenna turned to me, eyes wide and innocent. But I just got here. There's still so much to discuss about the big day. I crossed my arms and stepped between Mark and Jenna, blocking her view of him. Let me make this simple. You're fired, Jenna. We no longer need your services. Jenna finally dropped her fake smile, eyes narrowing maliciously. You can't fire me. Mark and I have a real connection here, don't we? She directed her attention around me towards him. Mark sprang up from the couch, outraged. Are you crazy? I want nothing to do with you outside of our professional relationship, which no longer exists anyway. You sabotaged our entire wedding. Jenna leaped up, her composure cracking. I did it for us, can't you see? This sham wedding had to end so we could finally be together. Her shrill confession rang through the room. We stared at her, stunned. Without another word, I marched to the front door and pulled it open. She tried pleading with Mark, but I stood unmoving, eyes drilling into her until she had no choice but to gather her things and leave. As the door slammed shut behind her, Mark and I faced the wreckage she left behind. Broken trust, lost money, a canceled wedding. I didn't know if our relationship would survive this betrayal, but looking into Mark's eyes, I saw love staring back. If we had that, I knew we'd make it, even if it wasn't exactly how we pictured.